Hi, and welcome to this tutorial on creating an environment from AWS. The main services we'll be using are EC2 and Cloud9. Cloud9 is a cloud IDE which enables us to create an environment within AWS. EC2 is a virtual server in the cloud, so you can have anything from Linux to Windows, depending on the image you select. I want to talk a little bit firstly about the benefits of AWS. So for example, we have things like ease of use. It's very easy to begin working with AWS because we can use a free tier account just to see how things are working and to explore and set up some basic services, which is what we'll be doing today. Also, scalability. Sometimes you need more capacity or less capacity depending on your requirements, and AWS lets us do this very easily by implementing things like ECS, which we can automate the scalability processes with. It's also really cost effective because you don't need to commit and you can analyze and see the costs and make decisions based on that, basically. It's also very, very flexible. So yeah, as I said earlier, you don't need to commit to a long-term thing. If you see you're using more resources, you can scale back and vice versa. Another thing is reliability. It's very good that AWS offers different availability zones. So if something was to happen in one availability zone, it would use another one. So that's a really big benefit, and that's a bit different to on-premise, where everything is in one fixed location. So that's a little bit about the benefits of AWS. As I mentioned, we are mostly going to be focusing on Cloud9 and EC2 in this tutorial. So let's get started with that.
Now I'm going to show you how to log into AWS. This can be a bit confusing if it's your first time. However, you want to go to the sign in button here and you want to log in with the account that you created as a root user. So you input your email address here. If you're working for a company or if someone has set up the account for you, you should get a 12-digit account ID. But for our purposes, we will use a root user and supply the password. I won't go through the steps because of security issues. However, I will demonstrate the user journey. So just make sure that you select root user if you set up the AWS account and specify your password, which should log you in.
The next service I want to talk about is Cloud9, which is a virtual IDE in the cloud. I've set one up earlier, so let's navigate to it now. Note that this IDE runs off an EC2 instance. So if we go back to our instances here, we can see it here. So whenever you create a Cloud9 environment, an instance will be created along with it, which is seen here. Because I've just started Cloud9 again, it's restarting the instance, so now it's running. It wasn't running before I rejoined the environment, but because I've restarted it, it's now running again. here. So basically Cloud9 is really good because it enables you to create a completely fresh environment in the cloud, and you can run your commands as if you were working locally, so things like ls, nano, and other commands that you would usually run locally. It's really, really good because you can easily pair program with other developers working on the project. If you want to search for a file, for a specific file, you can just do a / and then search for the file. This is really handy if you have a lot of different files available. You can also integrate it with source control, which is very, very useful if you want to connect it to Git, for example. Also, Cloud9 is really good because it enables you to have syntax highlighting. It automatically picks up which language you're coding in and will create the highlighting based on that. You can also add regions, and you can look at all your resources here if you add your credentials here. So for example, I'm in the London region, so I can see all my resources here. I don't have many resources set up. However, if I did, I'd be able to see them here. And I'm automatically connected with my EC2 key pair, which was created when the instance was launched, as we can see here.
So I also want to talk briefly about Cloud9 a little bit more here. So, for example, we can use source control with Cloud9, which is very good if your projects, if you collaborate with people on GitHub, for example. So, in order to do that, you can run basic Git commands, like, for example, git status, to see what's happening. We don't have any changes at the moment, but if I was to edit this file, for example, editing this file and saving it, and then I run it again, and it will show that I've created some changes. So we can just do something like git add all and git commit. The only thing is I haven't actually set up Git on here. So in order to use Git with Cloud9, you need to configure your credentials. That can be done with this command here. So you can add your name and email to that, and then you can get Git working basically from a Cloud9 instance. So that's very good if you want to collaborate with other people. By default, we are known as, when we go onto the Cloud9 instance, we're known as the EC2 user. However, you are able to get root by typing in sudo su. So that's quite handy to know if you need escalated privileges, for example.
So the main services we are going to be using are EC2 and Cloud9. EC2 is a virtual server in the cloud, so I will show you the process of creating an EC2 instance. Here we don't have any running at the moment, so I'm going to launch an instance. I can name it whatever I want. I'll just name it test for this purpose. Now here it's very good because we have loads of different distributions. To keep things simple, I will just go with the Amazon Linux image, which is free tier eligible. So if you're beginning with AWS and just wanting to explore, I really suggest that you choose this for basic requirements. In order to SSH into the instance, we need to set this up. However, for now, we'll leave it as it is. Please note, you really shouldn't be doing this unless you know what you're doing and don't have anything important on this instance. So I'll leave everything as it is and I'll launch it here. Note that it will be launched in London because that is the region in which I'm in. Generally, you want to choose the region which is closest to you. So I will create a key here because I want to be able to SSH into the instance. So I will just name it test key pair and I will leave the defaults as is. Notice it's been downloaded. Please do not lose this file because you will need it later if you want to connect to the instance. If you want to see further information, we can have a look here to see that everything was succeeded. So if I go back to my instances page, I will be able to see it here. It takes a little bit of time for the instance to begin. So you may have to come back to this in a few minutes. We can see it's now running. And we can see the key pair associated with the instance. If you would like to connect to the instance, you can do it in multiple ways. The way that I will show you now is to do it through the UI. So we just leave everything as it is. Usually, as it mentions here, the default username is here, EC2 user. And notice now we are connected to our instance, so we can do any of the commands which are usually found in Linux, so things like pwd, ls, and things like that. We even have nano on here too. If you want to see what else is available, I suggest that you Google the distribution. Notice it opens a completely new tab. Just be mindful that when the instance is running, you can rack up a lot of costs, so it is always better to stop the instance if you're not using it.
Now I'm going to show you how to navigate to an EC2 instance. Select Services, Compute, and EC2. Here you can see any instances that you have running and any that you have created. As you can see, I don't have any instances running. However, I've created 3. This is the test instance I created earlier. And when you start a Cloud9 environment, it automatically creates an EC2 instance, which can be seen here. If you're not using the environment, it's stopped, which is seen here. I'm using Firefox, however, you should use Chrome because you can't have certain functionality using Firefox, as can be seen here, so this is something to bear in mind. However, for this tutorial, it's not important for us to access this feature. Also note that EC2 instances may be running in a different region to which you're situated in. For example, if I go to North Virginia, here, I will not see any instances because I haven't set any up. So if you're struggling to find instances, please bear that in mind, that the region has to match. Okay, so the next step in this process is to create an AMI, an Amazon Machine Image, from our existing EC2 instance, which is running Cloud9. So here, it's running it here, so we can see the instance here. So the first step, and in order to verify we've got an exact clone of this instance, is to go into Cloud9. So as a demonstration, at the moment we don't have any files specified here, only a README. So I'm going to create a new file called hello.txt. And in this file, I will say this is a test. So basically, when we relaunch the EC2, when we create a new EC2 with this image, it should have this file on it. We can see it's on this original image here. So I'm going to navigate back to the image, back to the instance in the UI, and select the instance running here. And then I'm going to go into Actions and Image and Templates. Select that and Create Image. So for image name, we can put something like test image. And I would leave everything as is and create image. As I mentioned earlier, some things can take a little bit of time in AWS, so we just have to be patient and wait for this image to create. However, as we can see, the image is found within the AMIs here, but it's in a pending state. So we just have to wait a few minutes for this to become available. Once it's available, we can then create a new EC2 instance from this image. And in order to verify it's the image that we've cloned, we will be able to see that file that I created on the new instance. So let's pause the video here and begin again when the image has been fully created. So now I'm going to create an EC2 instance from the AMI that we created based off the Cloud9 image. So you want to go to Launch Instance, and I will name it Cloud9 AMI EC2 instance. And we can see a list of our AMIs here which have been created. Select the test image. Select the copy of Cloud9 instance, which has been created from the existing Cloud9 environment we did earlier. You want to create a key pair for this to be enabled to SSH into the instance. So I will name it Cloud9 key pair. Leave everything as it is and click on Create Key Pair. Note that it's been downloaded now for you to be able to use. Keep this file because you won't be able to regenerate it if you lose it. Going to allow SSH to be able to SSH into my instance. You shouldn't do this unless you know what you're doing and unless it's only a test, so it's fine in this case for demonstration purposes. So I will go ahead and launch the instance in the London region. The instance can sometimes take a little bit of time to get up and running, so just wait a few minutes until it's been created. We can see it's still in the pending state here. However, if we go into the instance, we can see that the details of the instance and that it has a public IP address, which we will need later to create a Cloud9 environment from. Okay, now it's running. However, it's initializing, so I'm going to pause the video and we can wait a few minutes for it to complete. So now I'm going to verify how to SSH into the instance, and we can check to see if the same file is on this instance as was on the Cloud9 environment. So in order to do that, navigate to your instance in the dashboard and click on Connect. Select SSH client and follow these instructions. Open a terminal. Navigate to your downloads folder, or wherever you stored the key file, and follow these instructions. First, you need to set permissions on the key to be able to use it by using this command. And next, we will SSH into the instance. Note that it will give me an error message about not being able to do it as root, but let me show you what that looks like. See here, it's asking us to use the default username, which is EC2 user. So I will just modify that command to be able to do it. So instead of using root, let's log in as the EC2 user. Okay, so now we can see that we're logged into this EC2 instance by using SSH. Let me navigate to the Cloud9 environment, and we can verify it's the same environment that we were using in the original Cloud9 by doing an ls and seeing our hello.txt. Okay, so in order to check that, we can also go back into the original Cloud9 environment. And we can verify that we're seeing the same thing on the EC2 and on the Cloud9 environment. So this is the Cloud9 environment hosted on a different EC2. So if I do ls, we will see hello.txt. So now in this section, you've SSH'd into a newly created EC2 instance, which was created using the same AMI generated from the Cloud9 instance. In the next section, we'll see how we can create a completely new environment based off this EC2 instance. So now we want to create a Cloud9 environment based on this newly created EC2. So we navigate to Cloud9 and select Create Environment. I'm going to call it Cloud9 New Environment. And you want to select Existing Compute for it to use the existing EC2. So we need to SSH, as we did earlier, into the EC2 instance. And we need to make sure that this SSH key is added into this location. So I will do a nano, and we can see there's some contents in this file at the moment. So I'll just add this key into this file. Once that's done, I will save the file. Make sure it's the same name and matches here. So we can verify that's been added by doing a cat. Yeah, okay. So the user will be an EC2 user, and the host will be the public IP of the instance. Which is found in the EC2 dashboard. The public IP is found here, so we need to add it here and click create. Okay, so that can take a while to begin, so I will just pause the video here now. So if you would like to explore AWS further, I would say that the official documentation is very, very good. And you should probably become familiar with some of the key services, which is EC2, which we've explored, and things like databases and networking, VPCs, things like that. So you can build your own infrastructure in the cloud. I would say also, if you're exploring, just to be aware of costs, because costs can rack up. So if ever you have sort of EC2s running, just make sure that you stop them unless they actually need to be running. And you can do that by selecting instance state and stopping instances here. The good thing about Cloud9 is that, as I mentioned earlier, when you create an environment, the instance doesn't run unless you're using the IDE, so that's very good. So it will only sort of start running when you're using Cloud9. However, do be careful about what you're running in AWS and how much cost it's encountering. I hope you found that tutorial useful, and good luck with your AWS journey. So just to recap what we've achieved in this tutorial is, first we created the Cloud9 environment and added a hello.txt file to it. After that, we created an AMI based on that environment. Then we created an EC2 instance using that AMI, which basically creates a replica of the original environment. And then we navigated to Cloud9 and we created a completely new environment based on the original environment, using the AMI. We used the EC2 instance to create this new Cloud9 environment. And we verified all this by making sure that original hello.txt file was present in all these steps. So I hope that's useful. And if you have any issues, I would suggest the first place that you look at is security and making sure that you can SSH into the EC2 instance from your local machine, which we went through in the steps. And if you have any issues, I would also make sure that the region you are creating things in is the same. I hope this tutorial was useful for you.